coming up with stories of alien encounters here on Earth for decades. For better or worse for those abducted. Strangest alien abduction stories. The Hill Abduction. While not the first to claim a close encounter, Betty and Barney Hill set the standard for alien abduction stories. In 1961, the couple was heading home from a 3-day vacation in the middle of the night when they noticed bright lights overhead following their car. It wasn't a plane or a helicopter, as it weaved in the night sky with them for 70 miles. When it stopped to hover above them, it was clearly a flying saucer. Gray beings looked out at them from the spacecraft, and the couple fled in their car. As they sped down the road, the Hills realized they were missing 2 hours worth of memories. Impressions of that lost time plagued their dreams, but their full memories were recovered with the psychiatric help of a hypnotist. They hadn't escaped the spaceship, but had instead been knocked unconscious and taken aboard. The gray beings took samples of their hair, skin, and nails, as well as scans of their brains and bodies. A needle was injected into Betty's stomach as part of a pregnancy test. The couple was then returned to their car, their memories wiped as the aliens left them behind. In this case, ignorance truly would have been bliss. Elizabeth Clara. Elizabeth Clara saw her first UFO in 1917 when she was just 7 years old, but it wasn't until 1956 that she was finally taken aboard. Her abduction was more like Trillians from The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy than it was like the Hills. Instead of being taken aboard for a quick sample testing, Clara found love out in the stars with her alien abductor. Her captor Akon didn't have 2 heads like Trillian's Zaphod Beeblebrox, but he did give her a ring and a trip to his home in the Alpha Centauri system. She lived with him for 4 months before giving him a son at the ripe old age of 48. Clara was returned to Earth, but her son stayed with Akon to learn the ways of his people. Despite their physical distance, Clara claimed she remained emotionally close to Akon for the rest of her life, speaking to him telepathically until her final days. Deshmont Woods Incident. One night in 1979, 61-year-old Robert Taylor was walking his dog in Scotland's Deshmont Woods when he noticed a strange dome-shaped object hovering in a clearing. 2 spiked metal balls rolled out from it and grabbed his legs. As they dragged him towards the ship, he smelled something acrid and passed out. Taylor woke up 20 minutes later, the clearing empty except for the strange markings on the ground and his dog barking wildly as it ran in circles. His pants were ripped, his legs too weak to walk, and his voice temporarily gone. Taylor dragged his body to his truck, but it didn't start. He was forced to walk the mile home to his worried wife, who immediately called the police. To this day, the Deshmont Woods incident remains the only criminal investigation of an alien abduction in Britain. Officials never gave any culprit, but it was never definitively stated to have not been aliens. The case remains open 40 years later, with those investigating no closer to definitively ruling what happened that night. Colonel H.G. Shaw. Alien encounters aren't just reserved for the post-nuclear world, as much as skeptics would love to explain them all away as hysteria brought on by that era's rapid technological progress and social change. The first documented alien abduction attempt was in 1896 in Stockton, California. Colonel H.G. Shaw and his horse-drawn buggy were stopped by a spaceship manned by 3 curious 7-foot-tall humanoids. The beings couldn't speak English, and Shaw couldn't understand their warbling, leaving both the human and aliens at an impasse of mutual confusion. One of the aliens tried picking up the colonel to take him to the craft. Key word being tried. The man was too heavy for the alien to lift, even when the others joined in. The unsuccessful kidnappers returned to their ship and left empty-handed. Antonio V Boas. 23-year-old farmer Antonio V Boas was plowing his field one night in 1957 when his tractor suddenly stopped working. A red light in the sky approached to hover 160 feet overhead, and from it came a group of 5-foot-tall aliens who took him aboard their spaceship. Like many other abductees, samples of his body tissue were taken. Unlike the others, however, he was also stripped of his clothes and his whole body was coated in a strange aphrodisiac gel. A beautiful platinum blonde alien woman then entered the exam room for... you can probably guess why. The farmer didn't have the same romantic experience as Elizabeth Clare, but the end product was the same. A hybrid baby that would be taken with the aliens when they left. When V Boas returned after his alien tryst, he didn't have love bites, but radiation burns all over his body. Disappointingly, he had no memory of how he got them, though I guess them being conveniently hand-shaped would be a bit too easy of an explanation. Amy Rylance. When Amy and Keith Rylance's friend Petra stayed over at their house one night in 2001, she stumbled into the living room around 11 p.m. to a surprising sight. A solid beam of light was carrying Amy's sleeping form out through the window to a waiting spaceship. Petra fainted at the sight. When she awoke, Amy was gone. She and Keith looked for her, but there was no sign of the missing woman, only burned bushes outside the window. The duo called the police, who understandably thought foul play rather than aliens were at the root of Amy's disappearance. That clearly wasn't the case when 90 minutes later, Keith received a call from a woman who'd found his wife dehydrated and with red marks on her feet an 8 hours drive away. Even more confusing, Amy's hair had grown during her time away, suggesting a lot more time had passed for her than it did for us here on Earth. Kirsan Ilyumzhinov. Former world-class chess player and Russian politician Kirsan Ilyumzhinov claims that he was abducted from his Moscow apartment in 1997 by aliens in yellow spaceships for a trip through the universe. As much fun as he was having exploring worlds beyond ours, however, Ilyumzhinov knew he needed to go back home. His new space friends understood. He was a busy man in the world of chess and politics, after all. Why was Kirsan chosen? He doesn't know. He was often ignored while on the spaceship, though his extraterrestrial companions were always willing to answer any questions he asked. What he suspects, however, is that chess is a gift from the stars, made universally understood around the world. Perhaps his prowess with the game put him on these beings' radar. Whitley Strieber. In 1985, acclaimed horror novelist Whitley Strieber found himself in a situation worthy of one of his own stories, though this time perhaps a bit less terrestrial than he was used to. On December 26th, Strieber was taken from his cabin in upstate New York by inhuman creatures for invasive brain and body examinations. There was no one type of creature where he was taken, though our favorite big-headed and bulbous-eyed greys were there, of course. Then, like everyone else, Strieber was returned home with his memories wiped, until some helpful and inadmissible in court hypnosis jogged his memory. Like all writers, Strieber couldn't let this go unwritten and uncapitalized on. His 1987 account of the encounter, Communion, became a New York Times nonfiction bestseller. While Strieber never went beyond calling his abductors the visitors, his experience is widely regarded as an alien and not just creature encounter, even if his descriptions are somewhat suspiciously reminiscent of his earlier novel monsters. Gustavo Gonzalez and Jose Ponce. While cryptids are inexplicable creatures generally bound to Earth, it seems that we've perhaps overlooked one cryptid's possible extraterrestrial origins: Bigfoot. Well, not exactly Bigfoot, but perhaps one of his cousins. In 1954, Gustavo Gonzalez and Jose Ponce were driving in the dead of night to prepare for work the following day, when the road they were on was lit by a ball of light. When they went to investigate, 3-foot-tall hairy aliens emerged from the glowing sphere and ambushed the two. These mini big feet tried to abduct them, but the two men weren't going with them peacefully. They tried fighting off their assailants with a scout knife Gonzalez carried with him, but the alien skin was too thick for even blades to pierce. Things were beginning to look dire for the two men as the small feet armed themselves with rocks, clearly ready to escalate the situation even further. But then the aliens ran back to the lightship with their tails between their legs and disappeared. Have you ever had a close encounter of any kind with an alien before? I recently made a trip out to Area 51 but came back empty-handed. Let me know in the comments below. 1. Pascagoula Abduction. 42-year-old Charles Hickson and his 19-year-old coworker Calvin Parker were fishing along the Pascagoula River in Mississippi in 1973 when they saw the flashing blue lights of a hovering spacecraft. The men found themselves paralyzed when 3 robotic beings emerged and took them aboard. Unfortunately, these mechanical aliens weren't as nice as the Transformers. While aboard, Hickson and Parker could do nothing but float under the examining and clinical gaze of a large mechanical eye. When they were finally released, Parker was stuck in a state of shock by the water, his arms outstretched. Hickson brought his friend out of his trance, and the two men immediately went to the sheriff's office, who laughed at them. However, when the two's accounts neither contradicted each other nor failed polygraph tests, the sheriff wasn't laughing anymore, especially not at the traumatized Parker. In the following years, locals reported seeing UFOs the same night as Hickson's and Parker's abduction, as well as the days preceding and following.